Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm Mary Fran Johnson, Executive Director of CIO Programs here at IDG, and I have the great pleasure today of talking with and interviewing Mojgan Lefebvre, who is a Senior Vice President and CIO for Liberty Mutual's Global Risk Services. Now, Mojgan has a very big and just recently getting bigger job at Liberty. A recent promotion expanded her role to encompass the global specialty business, reinsurance and commercial insurance products, and Liberty's 2017 acquisition of Ironshore, which is a multi-line specialty insurance provider. Liberty Mutual, as many of the people in the Boston area know so well, is a number 75 company on the Fortune 100 list. It's been around since 1912. Today, it is the fourth largest property and casualty insurer in the United States, with more than $39 billion in revenue, and a presence in 30 countries and a workforce of more than 50,000 people worldwide, about 4,500 of those IT professionals. Now, in addition to her CIO role at Liberty, Mojgan is also a lecturer with the MIT Sloan CIO Leadership Development Program, and she serves on the board for Women in Insurance Leadership. Before taking on her current role, she was the CIO for Liberty Mutual's Global Specialty Business, and before that, the Commercial Market Operation. And prior to joining Liberty in 2010, she was Corporate CIO for bioMérieux, a global medical device company. Great to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you, Mary Fran. Great to be here.
Let us start off by talking about all of these different business lines that you have under your charge now as CIO. When we talked just a few days ago, you were all about global specialty, and that is actually a whole world of insurance that most of us are not familiar with. We understand property and casualty and all that. So explain just a little bit about what your role encompasses now.
Sure. So Global Risk Solutions really encompasses all of what was global specialty, plus our large commercial insurance, which is, as you say, the property, auto, workers' comp, etc.
Yeah.
And then what is our reinsurance business as well. So within the global specialty business, I think of that as really very high risk that we insure, and those are unique risks that really large organizations and large corporations acquire. So it can be anything from the insurance that you get for your executives, for directors and officers, to unique things like errors and emissions, to oil and gas. And so really things that you don't hear about all the time.
Yeah.
So very unique, high risks. The volume is not that high. It's really each unique risk that's quite high of a risk.
Okay. And what's an example of one of those highly risky things?
Yeah. So, again, we could kind of insure kind of a large construction. So, for example, unfortunately, when 9/11 happened, quite a bit of the buildings that were insured were parts of some of what we had insured.
Yeah.
So that can be one example.
Okay.
Or perhaps airplanes as part of a military force. So those are some examples.
Okay. So these are pretty enormous, high-value sort of products and projects.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Let's talk about the IT group that enables and supports all of this. One of the things I always like to ask CIOs about is how the IT organization has been evolving in the last few years.
Sure.
I mean, as we all know, technology is at the heart of everything companies do today. It's especially true in insurance. And along with that, there is an acceleration that has happened with the role that IT plays with the business. So talk a little bit about how you have been evolving the IT group, because you've been in leadership positions for 8 years now at Liberty Mutual.
That's right.
So I imagine 8 years ago, things looked a lot different than they do today.
That's right. So I joined Liberty July of 2010. And I'd say at that time, the IT group was probably seen more as, a group that was more siloed on its own, and there was a group of individuals that sat really between the technology team and each of the specific functions, and were to some extent the translators between technology and the business.
Okay.
I found that quite unique and very different from what I'd experienced before. I had always been used to having technology team members directly interact with the end users. So I saw that as quite different. And it was something that I kind of took on right away. And I said, well, why are we doing this? Why is it that every meeting I go to, I actually have, a business systems person and an IT person? So that's something that over time has evolved. And I'd say, the evolution has been driven by different things. I would say the most effective and probably strategic driver of the change is our agile transformation. So as we look at the world around us, and as the world around us has become, very different with technology really changing the face of every business, be it retail or manufacturing, insurance is no different. And we've seen technology companies enter even the world of insurance now. Granted, there are more on the consumer side now, but certainly they've started to also come into the commercial and the specialty lines as well.
Yeah.
So to some extent, what we've told ourselves is, hey, if we don't disrupt ourselves, if we don't change the way we work, and if we don't let technology become really a big part of how we deliver our business and how we innovate, someone else is going to do it to us. And so as a technology organization, a couple of years ago, we truly said we've got to become a technology organization. We've got to become a software organization that delivers software the way these successful software companies like the Amazons and others do.
Yeah.
And so really the way we build software needs to change, and we've got to be embedded in each of the business entities where we're driving the build of that software. And so we've started to truly align with them and really have product owners who are business people who truly represent what we need to build. And so it's a complete transformation that we've been going through and we're still going through.
Well, and I think what's interesting when we've talked about the transformation at Liberty a few times, because you've spoken at some of our events in the past. I remember when you were running your first hackathons.
That's right.
That must feel like kindergarten now because you've done so many of them. But the scope of the transformation and even the agile nature of it, you're not just talking about IT. You're talking about other parts of the business. That's always an interesting cultural change for any company. What are some of the things that you tried to do as the CIO and as a leader of the IT group to get the rest of the business involved in the product owners, in just sort of the whole ecosystem around an agile transformation?
So, one of the things that we as CIOs always say is that a CIO is not only a technology leader, but we're probably first a business leader. And so you have to understand the business. You've got to understand why you're leveraging technology and using technology. I'd say, we've kind of come full circle where to some extent now there's a little bit of an onus on non-technology people to understand technology a little bit more as well, and to kind of own and be accountable for when we're building something. So it's not just about, I'm going to tell you what and then give it to you and you're going to build it. We're going to work on it together, and some of that prioritization and deciding, if I'm not going to get something, what I'm going to get is also on some of the non-technology people. So, I'm trying to make sure that my peers and others understand technology more. They understand the roles that are within technology. They understand what they're accountable for and what they're responsible for, and that they're truly bought into the fact that they co-own the success of any technology build that we do together.
Well, and I think I've had so many CIOs talk about the way the business just absolutely, their business colleagues applaud the idea that we're going agile because they're like, oh, well, we're going to get stuff much faster and you people are finally going to get on the stick here. And then they're so shocked when they find out how much of the work actually involves them as well.
That's true. I mean, for the product owners, we have to have fully dedicated, or at least almost fully dedicated people from the business who are responsible for that. And it's not that we're telling them you become IT people,
right?
But it's more, you've got to be fully engaged and own the responsibility.
Yeah.
So that's very true.
Well, it's nice too because I've always envisioned just sort of the bridge that exists between IT on one side and the business folks on the other side, and it's always seemed like IT is the one that has to go further over the bridge to engage. I feel like with the agile products and projects that I've heard described just recently in the last year, I feel like there's more meeting in the middle now. That there's an expectation on both sides that there's work involved.
That's true. I'd say we're equals. I mean, we're all part of the business. I mean, the old adage where we say IT versus the business. I mean, it is no longer that. It is all we're all different parts of the business, and I think this really drives you more and more towards that, where you've got the the underwriters sitting with the technologists, and they're talking, and they're all engaged. Each, performing a different role, but they're all truly engaged.
Well, and that switch away from thinking in terms of projects and thinking more like products, I think is probably, it's a powerful undertow right now in IT, and I think it is bringing a lot of technology organizations much more to the forefront in their own companies. And just the way that we talk about IT and the rest of the business today is starting to change. I know one CIO had, he wanted to break his IT people of the habit of saying the business as though IT was off on its own separate island. So he had a jar, and every time anyone said us in the business or referred to the business, they had to put $1 in the jar. And, they threw quite a few parties, using the money out of that jar. But eventually, and I've heard, I like the phrase IT and the rest of the business, because it's much more joined at the hip for real.
Yeah. Or sometimes I say technology people and non-technology people.
Yeah, that's a good way to cover it too.
As opposed to using it. Now, the interesting thing, Mary Fran, is Agile is not just about building a technology solution, right? I mean, you can do many things Agile. And so in insurance, we've got a lot of insurance products, especially one thing about specialty business is that we've got hundreds of specialty products, and our teams are actually quite innovative, and they our underwriters think of new insurance products all the time. And, as they introduce those, they bring them to market. And so the great thing has been they love the idea of Agile, where they're like, oh, okay, so we don't have to take a year or two to bring an insurance product to market. We can think of it from a minimum viable product perspective and iterations.
We can see something in a few weeks. And then we can try it out.
Yes.
Well, and the fact that everyone on the team has to come back with the customer input as well, that it can't just be a bunch of people in a room making up a product. I mean, I think it's eventually going to revolutionize everything for companies. I think that we're in the midst of that now. It reminds me of that William Gibson quote about the future already being here, but just unevenly distributed.
That's right.
I think agile transformations are like that for a lot of companies.
Right. And I think the new software companies operate that way naturally.
Yes.
And every day they're making their interfaces better. I mean, Amazon, every day you use it, you're really using some things that probably didn't exist hours ago.
Yes.
And so that's what we're trying to kind of work towards and become more like.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a terrific goal. Like many of the CIOs I interview, you don't play just one role. Among your many CIO responsibilities, you're also the CIO for an acquisition last year, Ironshore.
Right.
So essentially you brought, was this a startup? Tell me a little bit about that business and bringing it in. I know you've been involved in startups back when you were with bioMérieux, but this is a little new for Liberty. So what's that like?
So I guess maybe in the world of insurance, you can call it a startup, but it's a $2 billion company. So I'd say, in general, it's not really a startup. But having said that, it's a very startup culture. It's a very innovative culture. They're not bound by, some of the processes that as a much larger organization we may be. And so, really kind of making sure that as we're bringing them into the fold of the company and our processes and our systems, that we enable them and give them capabilities and yet don't stifle that innovative nature. And so it's a balance. It's a great balance. And, these integrations are, they're hard to do because you've got to do it while the business is working. So you've got to make sure you don't break things. It takes a lot of planning, lots of conversations. I would say a lot of communication and really change management and making sure that everybody agrees to things and holds hand and is aware of what we're doing. So, there are multiple things that we're doing. One is the infrastructure integration. We're ensuring that they're on our network and on all of our infrastructure and all of the capabilities that we have, collaboration tools and everything. That's one thing that we're doing. And then there's the financial integration side of it to ensure that we've got consolidated financials and reporting and so on. And then And then the rest of it becomes, all of our systems. And that's the hardest part. And I think one of the things that we've learned as we've done integrations over the years is, instead of looking for the perfect and looking for the best of each world, it's almost like best to decide that there's one ecosystem that you're going to go towards and go towards that, because the toughest thing becomes when you create these integrations where there are multiple data integrations back and forth, and that can become really complex, and that's where some of these things fail.
Well, it's because some of the statistics about mergers and acquisitions and the huge percentage of them that don't work out the way everyone hoped they would.
That's right.
It's one of the biggest black eyes in the business world as a whole, how difficult it is. But and I think you really struck on what is often the missing piece there is the transparency and the communication and like all the extra communication that you have to keep doing around it.
That's right. And you acquire a company for a set of things that it comes with.
Yes.
And sometimes I think once people acquire the company, then they forget and they try to change that. And I think that's one thing that Liberty's been really great at as we've done acquisitions, Safeco and Ohio Casualty were some of the earlier ones.
Yeah.
We've been careful and tried truly to maintain some of the capabilities and some of the positives for which we've acquired companies.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm just remembering that I forgot when I launched into my conversation with Mojgan that we are open for business on Twitter. If anyone would like to tweet in a question for Mojgan, we would absolutely welcome your tweets. It's hashtag CIO Online Live, and we have folks that are watching for it and will let us know. And so if you want to ask a question directly, please do. Okay, back. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about, we were talking about, the building a true technology provider inside of the company. And one of the examples of what you were able to do with that was the launch of WorkGrid last October. This is, in fact, it just won an award, a Digital Edge Award from IDG that I guess you'll be picking up later this month at our conference, our Agenda conference in Florida. But I wanted to talk about the role that your group and the others played. And so explain what WorkGrid is.
So WorkGrid software it's actually a software company that we've launched. And one of the first solutions that's in it is a digital assistant companies can actually leverage and configure towards their needs, and it really makes life easier for them. This is a solution that came out of our central IT group, so it's not specific to my group at all, but certainly I work very closely with that team and have seen the great work that they've done. The way that it came about was it was based actually on some work that team did for ourselves internally within Liberty Mutual. One of the pet peeves that a lot of our executives had was the fact that, they couldn't do a lot of approvals on their handheld devices. And as an executive, you were really traveling most of the time, and it almost felt like the moment you would move away from your desk would be when all those approvals would come in. They're time sensitive. And so to create a way where any of those approvals, be it an HR approval or a procurement or anything like that, for it to come to one place, into one tool, and for you to have the ability to review and approve it was really, it sounds very simple, but it was incredible. And the team developed it. And again, they absolutely applied agile approaches to doing it. The first version of it was very basic, very simple, but it really answered a problem that was there. And since then, it's been increasing in capability. And so when we saw the success in the organization, we decided that this was probably something that we could leverage elsewhere. And so in order to ensure that we kind of maintained that innovation and that startup culture, we said, hey, we can start a software company that would be separate and independent from the IT organization. And so this would be one of the first pieces of software that would go in it. Yeah. And so, the team's extremely excited to have won the award, and we're very proud of it at Liberty.
Well, and is this, and I want to get into, this probably would be a great transition to talking about how you approach innovation at Liberty. Right. I mean, a company with 50,000 people around the world, it's not like you can just have have a Facebook page where everybody throws an idea out. There has to be some sort of structure. So talk about the way, as the CIO, how you structure and prepare, how you get innovation going, both in the IT organization and connecting that with other parts of the business.
Sure. And that's the great thing. Really, there is no one group that owns innovation per se, which I think is quite powerful. Now, in order to start and in order to ensure that we created some centers of expertise, we certainly did have some efforts that were centralized, but now it's much more diffused and in different parts of the company. So within the IT organization, we actually formed a group that was to come up with ideas and structures and things that we had to do, and probably more than anything to create a culture of innovation. And so this was 2 years ago, 3 years ago that we created that group. And so they came with multiple things that we did. We had efforts that we did with IDEO, the organization that's all about design thinking. And so we had our management teams that did quite a few sessions with that group and truly kind of learned the way that you need to think about innovation and think about the viability of the ideas, that the feasibility and ensuring that you're getting the input of the end users and all of the design thinking principles. And then of course that's also where we established what we call Ignite. It's our hackathon, and it's a once a year 24-hour event where we bring dozens of our teams from all over the world, both technology and non-technology people together, and they have ideas and they develop them, and we've got prizes that go with that. But then we've got innovation that's happening across the organization as a whole. We've got our Solaria Labs, which is a labs team in a startup environment that truly focuses on disruptive technologies and innovation, and they're focused on the vehicles and autonomous vehicle technology, on the shared economy and connected home. Those are 3 areas in the insurance industry that are pretty critical, and so we're trying to make sure that we're investing and innovating in that area.
And does this become something that teams are assigned to it and they can work on it 100% of the time? Or is it, the famous 20% of your time?
No, these are actually dedicated employees of Solaria. So these are people that are truly focused and employees of that organization, because we feel like, if they're going to do that effectively, it's got to be 100% of their time. Within the IT organization, we've certainly tinkered with the idea of having folks spend part of their time on innovation. To tell you the truth, we haven't really struck the kind of perfect decision. I know there are companies where you hear every Thursday or Friday, or part of it is innovation. We just feel like innovation happens. It can't be, you can't have a specific day where it happens. Yeah. If people have ideas, we encourage them to bring them forth. And so hopefully as part of the hackathon and other venues, it'll come through as well. We sponsor a lot of accelerators like the Mass Challenge, Techstars, MIT 100K.
You're involved in Hub Week
and
here
others,
in Boston.
And we're involved with Hub Week, exactly. And then we also engage with startups. There have been some startups that our company has actually invested in, and we really think of it as a way to learn from them, and then of course also create kind of partnerships between those organizations and ours. And then we also partner with universities. We partner with MIT Age Lab and are open to other kind of venues as well. Yeah. So there's a lot that the company does to ensure that we're innovating all the time.
Well, and one CIO I was talking with said that he didn't want to establish. It's funny, I find CIOs fall into 2 categories. They either really strongly believe that innovation needs structure and deliverables and all those kind of project constraints, and then other CIOs that really would rather create an environment for it and encourage everyone. And one of the really cool ideas I heard out of that was to have a day a week where all meetings are forbidden. So people get a chance, and someone else said, where they take 4 hours a day and people stay off email and maybe do some reading and thinking and just kind of relaxing into thinking about ways to make life better with their IT. And I think that stuff probably has more mileage on it than the structures. A few CIOs I know who are more now the fans of unstructured innovation approaches had at some point in their careers dealt with very structured things that collapsed under their own weight is what they often talk about. Yeah. So it's just, I think it's a constant, kind of a constant wheel of trying different things.
Yeah, and I think it's a mix, really. I mean, one of the things that we said was, as part of our innovation work stream, was it's really about creating a culture of innovation more than anything,
Yes.
and kind of getting that mindset. And there are a lot of people who say, for example, Netflix and all the innovation they do, it comes from the fact that they've got a culture where it's okay to experiment, it's okay to not, for everything not to succeed. To set yourself up in a way where you can try things out. If it fails, it's okay. You learn from it, and then you do something else. And that was also one of the drivers of why we thought it's about how we're structured, how we're set up, and this whole, I keep going back to the agile transformation, but I think there's so many things that it brings. And one of the things was, if you are set up agile, you're not always thinking of these multi-year, multi-million-dollar investments.
No.
It's about small incremental steps, and
You're
a
learning
lot of
as you
times-
go.
Exactly, and so it just naturally results in a much more innovative type of culture and mindset and approach.
I think that's a great point. I really do, because the fact that you've got people, tech and non-tech people, as you say, talking with each other is. I remember a University of California professor that I thought was a brilliant lecturer years ago said that creativity comes from conversation. He was a great believer in just some little spark happening in your head as you're listening to somebody describe it. And I see that happen in our events. There'll be a panel discussion, and they'll get a question from the audience, and you'll see someone sitting at a table that all of a sudden goes like this and starts writing stuff down. And I love those moments, because I feel like that made their coming there for the day worthwhile, because they had a new thought.
Right. Yeah,
our
makes
brains.
sense.
I had someone use the phrase the other day, time poverty, and about how that one of the things he's struggling against is time poverty. And so when you I can imagine most managers would shudder when you think about the notion of like, well, take 20% of your time and do whatever you want. It's just, well, how do you actually find that? So it's just kind of an ongoing struggle. I wanted to loop back to a point we made when we talked about the agile transformation, and you said one of the interesting kind of outfalls from that is how IT planning and budgeting is different now, and that's changing. So I want to talk a little bit about that. You said you were realigning the tech finance function in ways that planning is different. So
That's right.
Explain what you mean.
Because again, so it's no longer about projects where, in the past, all of our planning has been, okay, so let's see what are the list of projects we have, and for each one of them, what are the resources, internal, external, exactly how much it's going to cost. And it's always wrong, by the way, anyway, right? Like you're always estimating, and the estimates are inaccurate, and it's almost being accurate in your inaccuracy.
And that's where those project statistics come from, when researchers say 70% of projects fail and 85% of them are late. And it's because everybody's guesstimating up front.
Right. That's right. And then regardless of how much you say these are estimates, people forget and they become very accurate.
Yep.
And so
all of a sudden they're written in ink, not pencil. Yeah, I know.
That's right. And so because, we're not manufacturing gadgets, so you can't really kind of say, well, I know exactly this is how much it's going to be.
Right.
So now in the world of Agile, it's much more about software products to which you've got teams. And so one of our philosophies is you want those teams to be as permanent as possible, to be together, because, again, you want the teams to learn each other, and you're really bringing the work to the teams. So to some extent, budgeting and estimating becomes much easier, and we do it in increments. So you can say, okay, so for this set of products, we've got 2 teams, and exactly how many FTEs the team is made up of, and that's your budget. And so then we do the planning, the specific planning we do on what we call program increments, and they're on a quarterly basis. And so at the beginning of each quarter, the teams, and these are the joint business and I should say technology and non-technology, or your other functions and the technology teams getting together and really planning the specific capabilities that they're going to focus on as part of their backlog, their agile backlog over the next 3 months. So really prioritizing everything that they're going to build. And then, as we know, when you go to build software, you may think something's going to take a specific amount of time, and it may take a different amount of time. But again, it's the scope that may change over time, but so what you deliver may be slightly different. But really, the number of people engaged and the cost of delivering that will be the same. So we're trying to really align how we budget and how we control much more with this methodology. And it's no longer about projects, but it's about teams and what they're going to deliver and the metrics that that go with that.
Well, I was just thinking that people that are in graduate school and in MBA programs and are learning project-based budgeting are probably learning a skill that isn't going to come in very handy in the future.
At least not on the software development side. Now, I have to tell you, this is a huge mindset change.
Yeah.
It's not about just the practices. It's also, even myself, I have to kind of keep thinking, I can't say how much is this project going to cost, and we've got to keep thinking differently. But we're changing the way we govern. We no longer have so the way we used to govern investments and projects before was at the beginning when a project was going to start. We would bring the estimates and the business case in, and we'd have an estimate, and we would call that our commit one, and that was really kind of like our first level estimate. Then when we would do the design, and we'd have much more specifics, we would come for a commit to. So all of that is changing, and it's no longer about that. And again, it's about much smaller increments that get delivered within a program increment being a quarter, and so it's the program increment that comes to our steering. And again, everybody understands that the team will do their best and they'll deliver based on the priorities of the business, but that it's not to the level of minutia that we would do before.
Yeah. I'm trying to imagine how CFOs would feel about and react to this. That must be one of the mindset changes that has to happen.
It is. Yeah. It is. Absolutely. And I'd have to say our CFOs have been fantastic in that they've truly listened and they buy into the agile transformation. I think that's been what's been very helpful is everyone from our CEO to our CFO and all of the organizations underneath, I think philosophically absolutely believe in that. And it's really working hand in hand with them that we've come up with the methodologies. The other thing that it changes is, again, with agile teams, you basically support what you build. It's no longer about team builds it.
You're not one and done.
They gives it to another. And so the whole measurement around how much do you spend on build versus maintenance also starts to go away. Because we used to measure that pretty religiously, where, we'd say we want to be spending more on building and less on maintaining. Well, it's no longer that philosophy. It's you're building something, and when you build it, you've got to take care of it.
You're committed to it.
And it's the same team. And, hopefully it also instills much better behavior in terms of quality. Because you're going to support what you build, so you'd better build it well.
Well, it builds in the ownership of it going forward. That's actually something that's probably in, the bad old days when it was business requirements came over the wall and IT worked on it for a while and showed it to the business people and they didn't want it. Things had moved on. That vicious cycle that everybody was in, it's turned into more of a virtuous cycle now where everybody's kind of got skin in the game.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's what the more I hear stories about companies and what they're doing with Agile, I think it's such a great trend that it is way beyond being an IT thing, that it's definitely a really big part of how business is being done in the future. Yeah. And I think we started learning it from the big tech companies, the ones
it's a software development approach.
It's a software development approach. But I've also noticed that a lot of organizations that were a few years ago very busy outsourcing their technical talent, now technical talent has a whole different value on it.
That's very true.
How do you tell me about your kind of recruiting and retention efforts? What are the sort of things you do as a CIO to get talented IT people to want to come and work for an insurance company that was established in 1912, versus a startup?
Great question. You're right. I mean, it may not be obvious to people that as a software developer, going to an insurance company is exciting. But I have to say, hey, we spend a lot of money on technology, and we spend $1.5 to $2 billion annually in general. So we spend more than a lot of companies, and I think once you know that, then you can
more than the size of a lot of companies.
Exactly. Yeah. You can start to get pretty excited. Why? Because data is really the most critical thing that any insurance company has.
Yes.
So ensuring that we're building systems that give you that data is a big deal. We certainly have a big campaign to ensure that we are seen and understood as an innovative, technology-driven organization where if you come as a developer, as someone in the IT organization, you are working on exciting projects, you are building new things, you're learning new skills, and you're truly at the forefront. And it's very different from what one might imagine an insurance company being.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of work with our marketing organization in ensuring that we're creating that brand. I think when you go on our website, you see a lot of that look and feel. And then we've also now made sure that we've got our teams, be it our engineers, going out there, speaking at conferences, ensuring that people understand some of what we're doing. We've got folks who are really viewed as some of the forefront of technologies like artificial intelligence and other areas where we're totally investing. Blockchain. I mean, I can kind of like list a whole set of things that we're investing in and doing real work in. And so we've got our people going out there, and we're seeing a very positive outcome from people getting excited and really understanding and coming to us. We are competing in some cases with companies like Google and others, and there are some instances where, for multiple reasons, someone may actually choose to come work for us as opposed to another company. So we can still continue to improve and get better, and but we've done a lot in this front, and I'm very excited that we're going to do more.
Well, let's talk a little bit about those emerging, exciting technologies that come up a lot: robotics, augmented intelligence, machine learning, blockchain. Do these? Doing work with these technologies, does it fall in your innovation efforts, or is it woven into the fabric of various parts of what IT is doing? How do you figure out where that all lands?
Yeah, I mean, I would think of it as it depends. So first of all, with every single one of these technologies, our goal is, to leverage them as much as possible with the goal of having our employees, all of our employees, to truly focus on much more value-added work. And if there's anything that is repetitive and so on, we can leverage technologies to do that, so that our employees are really doing the exciting work, the analysis, and really where the human brain is required. So that's kind of like the one thing. This is really what we're doing. And so RPA, for us, that's a much more basic type of technology, and that's something that we're using where maybe in the past we had our underwriting assistants put data into multiple systems. Well, we've now leveraged RPA in multiple places where we're kind of taking that rote work that they hated away from them, and now they can really focus on their underwriting job, and we're having Blue Prism or other kind of RPA technologies do this.
And RPA is robotic process automation?
It's robotic process automation. I mean, to some extent, you can say some of the technologies have been around for a long time.
They have. When we talk about automation in IT, sometimes I see the CIOs kind of rolling their eyes. They're like, this again, we've been doing automation. Yeah. But it's automation that is truly happening much more in the background.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of like back jobs that are running in the background. And if you can define it and it's repeatable, then you can have a program that's running in the background 24/7 do that, instead of having to involve a human to do it. And, it's nothing that they're really using their human capabilities for. Right. So it's replacing some of those things, and that's what RPA is. Now it's getting more and more sophisticated, where now there are some more kind of like cognitive capabilities that are getting added to it. And we're experimenting with that. To your question of like, is it part of the kind of the fabric of what IT does, or is it innovation? Yeah. I'd say, it's a mix. Okay. We certainly want to make sure that before we commit to, hey, I'm going to use this to solve this business problem, that we've actually played around with it. So when it comes to a new technology, we always do a proof of concept to ensure that we kind of prove out that things can be done. So we've got proofs of concept going on. So, one could say, well, is that innovation, or is that, well, it's kind of like both, right? It's innovation towards learning so that we can actually really use it. Yeah. And then there are some instances in which where our technology partners come to us and they want us to start learning some of the technologies they have, and we may not necessarily know right away what the business use case is, but we know that there is some, and so sometimes that's where we do more of an innovative kind of proof of concept with them. Again, with theories around the possibilities of using those, and in the artificial intelligence realm, I mean, we've got access to a lot of data, and so we know that our ability to mine that data, whether it's text mining or other things, is really can be very strong, and so we're experimenting with lots of different types of technologies, from artificial intelligence to others, to try to learn and make advancements.
Well, and I was interested in it when I think of people that have absolute lakes and mountains worth of data. You do tend to think of financial industry and insurance industry. And I think when we talked before, you said within like global specialty, when that was the one you were running, you didn't have a chief data officer in that unit. But what is Liberty's overall strategy for data and kind of your own way that you parse it out? Do you have a separate data analytics? Is there a chief data officer somewhere who's in charge of all the strategy? How do you set your data strategy?
I think so. I would say each of it is specific to our business entities, and now, of course, now with our new business entities, it's going to start to morph probably a bit more similarly within each of the entities themselves. We don't have a general kind of strategy outside across the entire organization for that, because we believe that data is very specific to your business, and so we want to make sure that it's as close to the business and the business problem as possible. Now, do we have a chief data officer? No. I mean, I personally kind of don't necessarily believe you need a separate chief data officer, because I'd say, okay, well, your chief information or technology officer kind of, to some extent,
what you're dealing with is data.
Right. Yeah. Now, having said that, of course, we've also got the actuarial kind of side of the house as well, right? So data and numbers and things like that for us are a big deal. In many of our parts of our organization, our actuarial group has analytics teams and people that you might consider data scientists, although again that term has different meanings. But people who are
the minute you give them that title, you have to pay them $500,000 a year.
That's right. So there are data analysts who are truly experts at taking data and analyzing it and driving business decisions from it and building models that really can help, whether it's with pricing or deciding if a risk should be written and things like that. So we have analytics teams, and we've kind of gone back and forth on should those be centralized in one place and service the different business entities, or should they actually be within the entities? I think as we started our very big focus on analytics, we said let's centralize it so that we build the center of expertise and capabilities, but with the goal to absolutely then embed it in the business units, because we firmly believe that these things need to be tools that our underwriters and our actuaries really have at their hands, and we don't want it to be dictated from somewhere else.
Right.
So that's kind of the approach that we've taken.
Well, I had a big in-depth conversation last week with a whole group of, it wasn't just CIOs, it was a mixture. There were some data officers and various people involved, and it all kind of centered around the differences between data strategy, data governance, data quality. It was, they were saying is just having a data governance approach, how that was different from having a data strategy. And one of the questions I asked the group, I said, is there an enterprise data strategy that your CEO and your business unit leaders could name right out? Companies always have we have a customer strategy and it's this. Is there a need for a data strategy? And when I asked the question, there was really kind of crickets in the room. I mean, nobody, people were like, why would you want a data strategy? What you want is a business strategy that is enabled and driven by the data that you supply to it.
Right.
Which probably makes more sense.
I agree. I agree. Because again, a data for depending on what question or what business problem you're answering like is supposed to be an enabler, really.
Right.
And we want data-driven decision making everywhere, whether it's about the customer or about our suppliers or about our agents and brokers.
Well, and with WorkGrid, with the creation of your own software company, you now have a data-driven revenue stream that comes from that. And that's, I always want to yell bravo for that when CIOs have that going, because you can finally talk about IT as something other than a cost center or an enabler. It's a great trend. It's a great trend to see. How have the customer expectations around the data that they can get from Liberty, from your various business entities, how has that changed in the last year or two? And can you think of any examples where customers are enabled to do something new and wonderful with data that maybe 3 years ago you wouldn't have given them or given them access to?
Right. I would say customer expectations in the world of any business have probably changed just because of what's happened and because of the fact that there are companies that give so much to the consumer that the expectation is, well, why wouldn't it work this way?
That's right.
Why can't I go to my website and go into my account and see all of my policies, understand my invoice and see everything? Or why can't I, if I have an accident, be able to just take a picture of that and then send that into my
text
insurance?
it in.
Exactly. And then get an estimate or if it's like below a certain amount, have it happen as a transaction without having to go in and take my car and so on. So again, a lot of what I'm telling you certainly is much more relevant on the consumer side because indeed that side is the most advanced, and that's where you're dealing with your end consumers, and the expectations are high, and our consumer organization is absolutely at all times looking at that and continuing to improve and do more, and some of what I just told you are absolutely services that are there, and more and more are getting introduced, and we and our competitors are doing the same.
Yeah.
So it's not like if we do it, we're the only one. I mean, it's just happening all the time.
Yeah.
But,
well, and the startup areas, the InsurTech,
Right.
those little companies, because I've seen you quoted many times talking about the need to disrupt ourselves before others disrupt us. It's kind of like the new golden rule, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
What are the sort of, when you look at what the startups are doing in the InsurTech area, what are the places where you're most interested, where you look at it and you say, well, it's an interesting approach to it, and by the way, we're doing a little something with that. I mean, like what are kind of the parts that you're really watching closely?
So one of the things that we're seeing is that even in the world of commercial insurance or specialty insurance, a lot of the agents and brokers, for the smaller product, like they do want to possibly go to a website like an Amazon website, but like go to the insurance company's website and answer a few questions and really kind of like get a quote.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to every single time have to call or email an underwriter and go through a long process.
Yeah.
And so that's an area that we're watching. We are absolutely launching a few of these broker portals. We've done some of them very successfully with a lot of great feedback from agents, brokers, actually engaging them in the process. One of the things we've learned, and I'd say it's something that we certainly saw with some of the InsurTechs, was the simplification of some of the decision making. And instead of
and the
asking
streamlining.
hundreds of questions, can you ask 10 key questions? How about leveraging a lot of the external data that exists? A lot of maybe if I know your name and your first and last name and something else, then your address and other things I can get from external data sources without having to ask you. So really making it much easier for people to do business with us. I say those are some of the things that we're watching, and we want to make sure that we're aligned with the trend, and to the extent that we can be ahead of it and introduce it, we will. But sometimes also you want to make sure you're not ahead of the time, because as much as you try, I mean, that the customer's got to come with you as well.
Yeah. Well, I know the Pull proof of concept and that, that agile approach where you get out in the field with things. I had a conversation with a CIO of a big restaurant chain, and they were watching smaller restaurant companies were doing things with iPads that they would set up, in some airports you can order right on the iPad. So they did they tried it in about a dozen. They have a chain of like 175 restaurants, but they were more kind of leisure, finer dining. It was a little
Right.
further up the restaurant chain than
Yeah.
what you find at airports.
Right.
And so they tried it in a few places and discovered right away that the customers didn't want that. You know,
Yeah.
they were coming to a nicer place because they wanted the better wine list. And
That's right.
they wanted to talk to the server. They didn't want to be poking around at an iPad.
Right,
And I
right.
thought that was a great example of getting out there and trying something because they were seeing various competitors trying it out as
That's
well.
right. And I would say we've become more, I guess, not being afraid of trying things out and saying it's okay, because you're right. Your customer will tell you. And so one example of something we launched was insurance for people who are taking snow trips. So if I'm not remembering the name incorrectly, I think it was called Snow Chaser or something. We launched it. We made it an app that was easily accessible.
smart.
We kind of like had 3-4 questions that they had to answer, and it actually was fantastic. We got a lot of feedback as we launched it, and then we made the product better. So I'd say we're becoming more courageous in how we're
Yeah.
leveraging technology, because it's much easier to launch something now than it might have been a few years ago. So it's okay to do it and learn from it, and then continue to make your product better.
Snow Chaser. It sounds like a weather app, but
That's
it
right.
wasn't. What
No, I
did
think
it
it
have
was-
to do with insurance?
I think, it's insurance for a travel, a trip that you're
Of course. For when you fall
So
and
like-
break your leg skiing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, or if your trip gets canceled. Or
Yes,
something
yes.
like that.
Oh,
yeah.
interesting. Well, and I was when we were talking earlier, I was interested in maybe an example of something that was a digital product launch that shows the end result of the kind of work that you've been doing in IT. And we talked about the Accident and Health Portal, the A&H Portal story in Australia.
That's right.
Tell me more about that again.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, our Australian team came to us and said they wanted to enter the $240 million A&H business, and there was an opportunity because some players had left that industry, and they were like, we need to enter, and by the way, it needs to happen within the next 4 to 6 months, because that's when the renewal season is. So it's not like we need to launch this, you've got a year or so.
Yeah.
We need to launch this. And oh, by the way, technology is an absolute integral part of it, because this is one where the agents and brokers absolutely depend on coming to a portal where they place the business, and
Okay.
they don't want to be interacting with the underwriter all the time.
They want it fast.
Right. And of course, they came to us once the business case had already been approved by the president. So it
Yes.
wasn't like, oh, tell us if we can and we'll incorporate
wasn't
it
a
in the
proof of
business case.
concept.
No, this
Yeah.
was like, we need to do this.
Yeah.
And so it was funny because that was just when we were starting to truly like fundamentally think about Agile and doing things differently. It was also coincident with our move to the cloud and really leveraging a lot of Azure or AWS and other cloud partners. And so my team evaluated the options that we had. One was to go out and buy a package software that was out there, except the word on the street was the package solutions none of the agents and brokers were happy with. Plus, they were very expensive and took a long time. The other one was to leverage some of our existing platforms. But again, we knew that, those were built on old technologies and they couldn't do a lot of the things that we wanted. And so really it came down to, we've got to do this with new technology, we've got to build it, and we've got to do it agile. And I was like, you guys are crazy. You're taking this thing and you're kind of like almost choosing the highest risk option. But the fact was none of the other options would meet the timelines, or at least even had a chance of meeting the timelines.
But that was one of those highest risk, highest reward
Yes.
situations.
So if it worked,
Yeah.
it would be fantastic.
Yeah.
We just had to mitigate the risks. And so the team partnered very closely with the chief underwriter who'd been hired for this business. He knew that the technology solution was absolutely critical. We sent a couple of our developers to Sydney, and they went out and started talking to the agents and brokers. This was the first time that the IT team was like literally sitting face to face with the agents, and
Yeah.
they were energized. They were like, oh my God, like to hear them tell us what they wanted and what was key to them. And so they did the framing for a couple of weeks, and then we formed a team. And then at that time, Richard, the underwriter, he actually went to Belfast, where the team was based, and he spent a couple of weeks with the team. And so, they built the epics and the user stories, and they prioritized them. And so, to make the long story short, literally within 2-3 months, we had the first product available. They did they did amazing things during this time. This team was able to make decisions on their own. They on their own decided that, instead of doing the portal first, they do the underwriting platform first, because that would allow them to do it in time. So, the ability to make decisions quickly with all of the decision makers within the team was just absolutely valuable. And so, and then post that first product, and they added the other products. And so literally within the 6 months, we had all 3 product lines within the A&H solution in live and really in place for the agents and brokers. The beauty of it being that the strike rate of quote to bind was double the competitors.
Oh, so
they had built a solution where they truly listened what the needs were. It wasn't rocket science. It was about truly having that direct interaction, understanding what they were looking for, and then building it and reacting to it. And so it was just really, and then there was real-time rating and quoting, which was again unique to the solution. So it was truly a success. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to change the mindset of all the people around, who wanted reports and governance and so on. But kind of having Richard truly bought into it and engaged with the team was absolutely invaluable. And so,
you got to kind
experience.
of practice what Agile preaches.
Yes,
it's just and also the metrics you got out of it were genuine business metrics that everybody cared about.
They were, and so it didn't matter if people said, "Well, but you told me I would get this and I didn't get it," and it was like, "That's right."
Maybe the next iteration.
Exactly, and so
wait 20 minutes.
They had like 30 releases within a matter of months, and so it was just a very different way of working.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, and you mentioned the cloud, and I was curious about how your cloud strategy has been evolving. I think you told me you've got about 27% of all your compute power in the cloud.
That's
Is
right.
that for your units or for Liberty as a whole?
That's for my unit.
That's for your unit.
For my unit, or at least my unit when we spoke.
And
so
you're
I've got to go
looking-
back and reevaluate.
I know, now that you have a bigger unit, and you're looking to double that in the next 2 to 3 years.
That's right. It's really
Yeah.
as we look at where our applications should be, where our focus should be. Again, we want to make sure our focus is on building business capabilities, and so things that other companies can do better than us, and cloud companies and other things like our infrastructure and data centers. We think that over time we can have all of those. As much of our applications be in the cloud, and no need for us to necessarily have as many data centers and large data centers as we have.
Yeah.
And really our focus should be on business capability. And so our goal is that, within the next 2 to 3 years, we're striving to have 50 to 60% of all of our compute in the cloud. And so we're certainly starting with what we're building new, but we're also migrating some of what we have. We're being very thoughtful, because we don't want to just move to the cloud just for the sake of it. We want to move things that we think have longevity, and they're not going to be retired over the next 2 to 3 years.
Right.
Within Global Specialty, we have 27% of our compute already in the cloud. And we're aggressively working towards getting that number to be
Well, and I
higher.
remember the initial vendor pitch on all of the cloud movement was how much money it would save everyone. And of course, that turned out to be pretty much untrue. But what it does is it speeds time to market, new applications.
right.
And I've run into so many CIOs who say everything new we do in the cloud, and we don't try to drag the legacy there. So,
Absolutely. And really, of course, there's no excuse for us for it to be more expensive, because that wouldn't make
Right.
sense. It's kind of hard to do the apples to apples comparison, of course. But really, it's not necessarily a cost play. More than anything, I'd say it is a performance and agility play. And for us, our Asia Pacific regions, where we didn't have data centers very close to them, were ones that were suffering with some of the performance of our applications. And so with the advent of AWS, right beside them, some of the performance of some of our applications, especially our document management applications, have truly improved in a huge way.
Yeah. Interesting. I wanted to switch to just sort of more of a personal query. This is, you've been at Liberty as a CIO for 8 years now, which, as anyone who's ever read CIO magazine in the past knows that the average industry tenure is about 5 years. So you've fallen into that category of CIOs that I think of as the longevity group, where you've been with the company and your role has been expanding there. And I just wondered if you had how you've seen your own role change over time, and if you have advice you could offer fellow CIOs who would like to settle in for more, they'd like to get into that longevity club where you stay in a role for several years and, obviously have more expanding business responsibilities. So what are sort of your CIO wisdom is what I wanted to tap into a little bit.
I'd say as with any, I would think as with any role, really, like there are some things that are table stakes. So clearly you've got to do your job well. You've got to be viewed as you're performing and then some, because if you're not doing that, it's kind of hard to make up for that, right?
Yeah.
So
the foundational stuff has to be flawless.
Yeah. I mean, and operationally things got to work, and then it's only once that's working that then you can focus more on the what additional business value, what about innovation, what about agile transformation, et cetera. And then I'd say, it also comes down to relationships. I mean, again, we're all humans, and so ensuring that those relationships are there and that people know you for what you do, but for who you are, and ensuring that those are strong. And I say that really to anyone where they say, how do I make sure I succeed? And I'm like, you've got your performance currency is kind of like a table stakes, and it's a given.
Yeah.
Certainly ensuring that you've got the right relationships and that you do for others as much as you can, because you never know when that's going to come back and really become something that you can count on.
Yeah.
But I'd say staying close to the business, truly being there and not thinking of yourself as just the CIO, although just the CIO is a pretty big responsibility. But,
and it keeps getting bigger,
right,
is the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But truly thinking of yourself as a leader of the company. And, and I say that to my team. I tell them, I don't just expect from you like your specific functional responsibility. You're a leader on my team, so contribute when and where you can, and raise your hand. So I'd say all of those same things apply. I mean, Liberty's been a fantastic company for me. I've enjoyed it. It's also about enjoying what you're doing. The great thing has been there have been new challenges, and every few years things have changed. So that's kept it very interesting and exciting as well. So I'm sure that that comes into play too, right?
That has
really
helped.
enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, one CIO said to me that he thought that it was very important that once you get a seat at the table, you don't sit around too long. Like, don't just stay there at the table enjoying how fabulous you are. Get out there and strike up those relationships and work really hard kind of across the businesses. And I think we are just about out of time. The last thing I wanted to ask you was on keeping up with technology trends and all the changes in the industry. How do you do that personally? How do you kind of keep aware? What is your just personal approach to continual learning?
Read a lot. I mean, for sure, you've got to read a lot of the trade magazines. I mean, I read a lot. I try to read a lot about insurance, but then also read a lot about technology. Yeah. And then leverage your teams. I've got kind of these multi-hour technology deep dives that I have my teams organize on different topics, and they bring those expertise to us, and I ask my entire leadership team, extended leadership team, to attend and to learn, and then go out when you can. Attending conferences when you can. I mean, you've got to be mindful. Obviously, you can't go to a lot of things, or send your teams out and make sure that you're talking to them. But I'd say a combination of all of these things.
Good. Well, I would say you just mostly mean come to my events. Once you come to my events, you'll have that all covered. Thank you so much. It's been such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed getting a chance to talk about all this. And I want to thank our audience for sticking with us for our CIO Leadership Live with Mojgan Lefebvre from Liberty Mutual's Global Risk Services business. We will have a copy of this. The video will be posted by tomorrow on CIO.com, and there will also be an audio podcast that will be posted to Google Play, iTunes, and SoundCloud. And our next episode of CIO Leadership Live will be April 12th, when I will be back talking with Clara Jelenkova, the CIO at Rice University. So thank you very much for joining us today, and take care.